One of the hidden benefits of this crazy quarantine that I've seen is this window into other folks' lives that we may not have ever had otherwise. Over the last few weeks, one of the more popular videos I did on Facebook Live was a tour of the little house chapel that's over in the rectory. It was a real pleasure to invite everyone into the house for Mass for a week or two while we're still figuring out how to do all this other stuff that we needed to figure out how to do. In line with that, there's another question that comes away to a priest on a frequent basis. Why do we wear the things that we wear at Mass? What does it all mean? We don't just wear what we want to wear. It's all spelled out for us, and not only does each color have a significance, each item of vesture also means something special as well. What I'd like to do is just to walk through what each item is, why we wear it, and the prayer that goes with each item as well. But before I begin with the vesture itself, just a question. Why is it important that we as priests wear something special for Mass? To help answer that question, I found a document from the Office for the Liturgical Celebrations of the Supreme Pontiff that addresses this question, and its statements were enlightening. For one, the question, why to wear sacred vestments? As the document states, it's the fact that these things are not worn in ordinary life and thus possess a liturgical character helps one to be detached from the everyday and its concerns in the celebration of divine worship. In other words, when we put on these unique and particular garments, it tells me as a priest that I'm about to do something special, something unique, and something that's different from everyday life. After all, when we stand at the altar to offer these sacred mysteries, it is the closest that heaven and earth ever come together in this life. But there is a secondary reason for the donning of liturgical garb as well, to minimize the individuality of the one who wears them in order to emphasize his liturgical role. In a way, vestments depersonalize the priest in order to allow the true protagonist of the liturgical action to shine through, Jesus Christ himself. When the priest is leading the celebration of the sacraments, he's acting in the person of Christ, the head, and the liturgical garb that he wears helps to signify this. And the process of donning the vesture helps the priest to move from his secular roles and responsibilities into his sacred duties of laying down his life at the altar of God. And this process traditionally begins with him washing his hands to wash away the duties and cares of the world so that he can approach the living God with a heart made pure. In many ways, it is akin to Moses removing his sandals prior to approaching the burning bush in Genesis. When we approach the holy, we should do so with care, with dignity. As with every step presented here, there is a prayer that accompanies this action, which reflects the intention of that act or the garment and prepares the priest for his sacred duty. With the washing of hands, he says, Da Domine, virtutem manibus meas ad abstergendam omnem maculum, ut sine pollutionis mentis et corporis valiem tibi servire. Translated, give virtue to my hands, O Lord, that being cleansed from all stain, I may serve you with purity of mind and body. After he washes his hands, the vesting begins with the amice, a rectangular piece of cloth with 2 strings attached. It's placed around the neck to cover his normal, everyday clothing, even if that clothing is his clerical attire, and it's tied around the waist. The prayer that is used while donning this amice references St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians in calling the amice the helmet of salvation, which protects in the battle against evil. Impone Domine capiti meo Galliem salutis, et expungandos diaboculus incursus. Place upon me, O Lord, the helmet of salvation, that I may overcome the assaults of the devil. As a diocesan priest, we just put the amice on around our shoulders, but some of our more monastic brothers, such as the Benedictines, the Franciscans, the Dominicans, they will drape the amice over their heads first and let it fall back onto their shoulders outside the chasuble to reflect that it is the helmet of salvation. On top of the amice is the alb, the long white garment that's worn by sacred ministers, that recalls the white garment that was given to us at our baptism. When we were baptized, we were washed clean in the blood of the Lamb, as referenced in Revelation 7:14, which is also reflected in the prayer that is said while donning the alb. De alba me domine mundicor meum, ut in sanguine agni de abatis gaudius per furore sempiternis, which translates, "Make me white, O Lord, and cleanse my heart, that being made white in the blood of the Lamb, I may deserve an eternal reward." And why alb, this term? It just means white in Latin. So everyone's favorite headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, perhaps at his christening when he was named Albus, was destined to have that long white flowing beard that was depicted so beautifully in those movies. So even the name reflects the purpose. As you can probably tell, these long white garments come in many shapes and sizes, and even colors sometimes, if you include our Eastern Catholic brothers. But their primary symbol is one of purity of heart, that is required to enter into these sacred mysteries to guide us along our path and journey towards heaven. Next, we find the cord, or the strip of cloth, which can either be white or a color to match the color of the day, which I'll cover in a future video. This cord that's wrapped around the waist is commonly referred to as the cincture, which is a variant of the Latin word cingere, which means to bind or gird, to cinch together. Today, it's quite simply just a belt used to hold both the alb and the stole in place. But as with all these garments, there's an additional meaning and prayer that is attached to this simple belt. Praecinge me, Domine, singulo puritatis, et extingue in lumbis meus humorum libidinis, ut manae in me virtus continentiae et castitatis. Translated, "Gird me, O Lord, with the cincture of purity, and quench in my heart the fire of concupiscence, that the virtue of constant continence and chastity may abide in me." In the section on chastity and the sixth commandment, the Catechism of the Catholic Church calls the quest for chastity an exercise in self-mastery. And the prayer for the cincture reflects that quest for self-mastery, so that the one who has gained this mastery can offer himself freely for the other. In the priest, this desire is to be freely given for the sake of his bride, the church, to whom and with whom he gives life. After the cincture, we find a small garment that is not in use much anymore today, the maniple, which is an ornamental band or strip of cloth, typically matching the chasuble, that is worn on the left arm near the wrist. The term itself relates to the Latin word for hand, and was also used in ancient Rome to denote a handful of soldiers in a military unit. After the Second Vatican Council, its use faded out of practice, but it was never fully abrogated or abolished. Perhaps this little garment originated from the mapula that the Romans wore knotted to their left arm, as it was used to wipe away tears or sweat. Jumping from there, medieval ecclesiastical writers regarded the maniple as a sign of the toils of the priesthood, which is reflected in the prayer for the garment. Meriar Domine portare manipulum fletis et doloris, ut cum exultatione recipiam mercedem laboris. May I deserve, O Lord, to bear the maniple of weeping and sorrow, in order that I may joyfully reap the reward of my labors. There is a reference in this prayer to Psalm 125 as well, which the Vulgate, the Latin translation, presents in the following way. Qui seminat in lacrimis et exultatione metent, euntes ibant et flebant, portantes semina sua, venientes autem venient in exultatione, portantes manipulos suos. They that sow in tears shall reap in joy. Going they went and wept, casting their seeds. But coming they shall come with joyfulness, carrying their maniples. After that small garment of the maniple, another longer strip of cloth is placed around the neck. For the priest, this stole hangs straight down over his chest, while the deacon wears his hanging from his left shoulder to his right hip. Again, this garment matches the color of the day for the liturgical celebration. But this stole is the distinctive element and symbolizes the power and the authority of the ordained minister. As such, it's always to be worn in the celebration of the sacraments and sacramentals. In recognition of the mystery of his calling to this great authority of Christ that has been handed on to him, one of the little acts of devotion that a priest does is, as he places the stole over his head, he kisses it first and then drapes it over his shoulders. And the prayer for the stole can be a quite powerful prayer as well. It helps me to orient towards the celebration that we are entering into. Reda mihi, Domine, stolum immortalitis, quem perdidi in prevaricazione primi parentis, et quamvis indignus accedo ad tuum sacram mysterium meriar tamen gaudium sempiternum. Lord, restore the stole of immortality which I lost through the collusion of our first parents. And unworthy as I am to approach thy sacred mysteries, may I yet gain eternal joy. That's our goal. That's the goal of what we celebrate, to gain eternal joy, to gain life in Christ through the celebration of the sacraments and life to come due to our living relationship with Christ the Lord. Finally, vesting for Mass, the priest places over his head the chasuble, a large, oftentimes seamless, and certainly sleeveless outer garment that the priest wears at Mass. Originating possibly from the Latin for, quote, little house, the roots of the word are passed down to us in English via the French casula, or hooded cloak. Perhaps this idea of a little house took on the symbolic meaning because it would completely cover the sacred minister who wore it. And from a more theological point of view, where the stole is the symbol of that priest or deacon's authority, the chasuble is a sign of his charity, his humility before the Lord. Hence, the exercise of our power is always to be tempered by the exercise of our love towards God, our love towards our neighbors. And the prayer for the chasuble reflects this sweetness of task to which the priest is appointed. Domine, qui dixistis, lugem meum suave est, et onus meum lave, fac ut isted portare sic valium, quod consequar tuam gratiam. Amen. O Lord, who has said, my yoke is sweet and my burden light, grant that I may so carry it as to merit thy grace. With that prayer, the priest is ready to step forth from the sacristy to begin the celebration of the sacred mystery of the Mass, that unique task that is his in the life of the Church. In my next video, I hope to cover some of the other garments and vesture that we use, not just at Mass, but in other sacraments and sacramental life of the Church. Again, to cover what they symbolize, to cover what they mean, so that as we see them used, as we recognize them, we can both know what they are, but through that knowledge also come to a deeper appreciation of how Christ leads us through them to a deeper encounter with his mystery. God bless.